Thank you very much. And thank you for having me here today. Thank you for coming. This is really, really a pleasure. I was telling everyone yesterday that during my time in monastery, where we trained mostly silently, and certainly without a lot of discussion of the Dharma, about halfway through that time, Okamura Roshi showed up as if from space, and gave a week-long set of lectures, and it was like water. It was so amazing, and ever since then I've watched him, and I've watched this community from afar, and I've always been just so glad that you exist, and that this place exists, and so to finally be here with all of you is really, really a joy. I came to this practice when I was about 18 years old, and I often tell people what I wanted in the beginning, if I'm honest, it wasn't realization exactly. You know, I had some ideas about realization, I had some ideas about enlightenment, but they were very colorful. I grew up in a small town, and we had a used bookstore with a small Eastern religions section, and I read everything from that, and some of it was Buddhist, some of it wasn't Buddhist, and what I got out of that was this vision of awakening, or this vision of realization that was kind of technicolor and a little bit trippy, and I thought that would probably come with it. You know, if I practice long enough, eventually I'll see all sorts of colors and you know, catapult into different dimensions and things like that. But what I really wanted, I think, was to be a Jedi. I had a fairly clear idea when I was younger of the person I wanted to be, the kind of person I wanted to be. And that person had a kind of diamond clarity of vision. And that person was fearless. And that person was strong. And if I'm honest, that person was probably unhealthily detached from what was going on around him, you know, because he had this kind of panoramic vision, right, and was observing, but not necessarily getting involved. And he knew just what to do, all the time, and he just did it. It was fantastic. This was my Jedi self, and he was pretty impressive. And, you know, as time went on, I kind of started to settle into Zen. And I think Zen, in many ways, spoke to that aspiration. You know, if you read it the right way, right? And if you look at the robes from a distance, it looks, you know, it's black, it's very cool. And I thought, this is the right path for me. And eventually I was ordained, and I entered a monastery. And what we talked about yesterday in part was that part of what happened for me along the way was not that I took these steps closer to being my aspirational self, not that I found that path or found the people who would get me there, but that eventually I gave up. And I wanted to talk a little bit today about this giving up. When I say I gave up, I don't mean that I threw in the towel, exactly. But at some point, the practice became full in itself. And monasteries are great for that, because you're busy. You're busy from 3 o'clock in the morning until 9:30 or 10 o'clock at night. You don't really have time to dream about the person you're going to be. It's all consuming. There's always something else to do. at some point that becomes your project. Is just, going where you need to go when the bell rings. And there's this letting go of the fruit, this letting go of the thing that you wanted from this in the first place. And I think we know intuitively how this works. Marriage, if you're married, marriage is an act of giving up. Right? We don't frame it that way. But you're giving up control of your life. Right? We might not feel that so clearly when we first get married because maybe we're young and we're excited and we feel like we're actually taking the reins, and you're taking someone else's hand and you're going to go create a thing. But in reality, right, you're relinquishing control over this person that you're trying to become, and you're sharing it now with someone who has their own person they want to become. You enter into a world of compromise. And in terms of that thing that you started out thinking you wanted, or that person that you thought you wanted to be, you enter into a kind of loss. And then if you have children, it happens again, even more. You have to let go of so much, and you have to give up. So I keep saying give up. There's kind of giving up in the sense of relinquishing, but there's also giving up. There's surrender. They're saying this isn't going to happen, right? Whatever it is that I'm taking on, this new responsibility now is going to take precedence over the thing that I thought I was aiming for. And if you shave your head and you put on robes, you do that again. You give up. Because now you have this responsibility to a teacher, and you have a responsibility to a sangha, and you have a responsibility to a tradition. And all of these things are asking something of you. And they don't care who you wanted to be. They don't care about what you thought you wanted. They don't care about your me project. That's not part of their agenda. And you agree to that. I think a lot about the story of the Buddha. Before, I think we have this idea, we talk about renunciation and we talk about him relinquishing his palace life. He had all the good stuff. And he let it go. But that wasn't his giving up moment. Right? And then he goes out into the woods and he takes up all these ascetic practices. And he's doing this all in service of this larger question of trying to understand and resolve suffering. But even then, he's really taking on a kind of me project. He's trying to see how far he can go. He wants to be the person who's the best at this, whatever this is. He's still not giving up. Actually, he's holding on really tightly to something. And then he reaches a wall, but he still hasn't given up. He's just at an intersection. The moment at which he gives up, in my understanding of this story, is when he reaches the Bodhi tree and he commits and he says, I will not stand up again until I have resolved this issue. That's the first time in this whole process that he has made a commitment on that level. He's basically saying, I'm going to die if I can't do this. I'm all in. I'm not 99% in. I'm all in. This is it. And he sits down. And we all know what happens after that. That's the Buddha giving up. Nothing gets to happen until that happens. I've never met anyone who came to this practice who didn't want something from it. It's natural that we want something from it. It's really rich, right? And it clearly offers a lot. And when we see that it offers a lot, we think that it's offering something to us. But eventually, I think we start to shift. You know, if we stick around long enough, if we get frustrated enough, if we get bored enough, if we get disappointed enough, we start to realize that we're not here because this is offering something to us. We're here because we want to be part of the offering. And so, we're taught that when we sit in this way, that we're not sitting as the Buddha did before he realized awakening. We're sitting as he did just after. We're working from the assumption that this is it. This is what we get. This is all we have. I saw a New Yorker cartoon the other day. There was a teacher and a couple parents, and they're sitting in a classroom the way that you do. You know, the parents are sitting on these little tiny chairs. And the teacher says, I really laughed when I saw this. The teacher said, "We've fully unlocked your child's potential. This is all there is." As someone with kids, that's funny for particular reasons. But I also wanted to put it on the Zendo door. You know, we want so badly to see ourselves in terms of our potential, right? We want to imagine that we're a seed, but that we're not yet a tree, because as long as we're still a seed, there's so much that could happen, right? There's nothing to get depressed about yet. And we want to do this with other people too, right? We want to do this with the people in our lives. When they make mistakes and when they disappoint us, we want to look at them and we want to say, "But I see your potential," right? Yeah, you're not there yet, but I see what you could be. And that's so beautiful, right? We want to hold that. That's not what this practice asks of us. Not in my understanding. This practice asks us to work from the assumption that we are fully cooked. We can be taken out of the oven now. This is it. This is as wise as you're going to get. This is as compassionate as you're going to get. This is as clear as you're going to get. So what do? You don't have any excuses anymore. In a few minutes, we're going to say these vows, and they're huge. But they only mean something if you take them up. And you can only take them up if you don't have obstructions. And the only obstructions you can have are yours. The only thing that can prevent you from fulfilling these vows is you. And your belief that you're not ready yet to do it. That you're not qualified. You are qualified. By definition. We say that the only person who can sit in Zazen is Buddha. Everyone just did it. You're qualified. I was told very early on that our primary responsibility in this practice is to see others as Buddha. We talked about this some yesterday.
There's a spider on you.
Oh, thank you. That guy's been kind of scoping me out for the whole morning. He kept going back and forth, and he was just waiting for me to turn around. Thank you. To see each other as Buddha. We hear that, and we naturally imagine that Buddha means potential. Right? That there's some magical little, there's a little blue glowing light inside each person, and that what we're developing is the lens by which we can see that in another person. Right? We're cultivating our own vision, so that when I look at you, I see that thing. Not you, but that little tiny seed. I think we all hear it that way at some point. It's really inviting. And it's really seductive. This idea that I can see something that you can't see. Right? I see a special part of you. But that's not seeing others as Buddha. That's seeing your projections of Buddha on someone else. Seeing someone else as Buddha is seeing someone as they are as Buddha. Not as a Buddha to be. Not as a baby Buddha. But as Buddha. You can do that if you choose to act as Buddha. Now. In spite of all your limitations. In spite of all the things that you think you can't do. In spite of all your ignorance and your neuroses and your fear. If you make that determination to just step forward as Buddha, to sit as Buddha, to stand as Buddha, even if you don't think you know how, you agree to do it. If you can agree to do that, it doesn't matter if you can see this thing or not. Because you very quickly realize it doesn't matter. Buddha is as Buddha does. It's not a quality of mind. And that's the other thing we talked about a lot yesterday. We talked about the privilege of the mind. How we come to this practice and we have this idea very naturally, because this practice speaks so much to our experience and to our seeing. We get this idea that this is about the mind. That I'm cultivating my mind. That I'm watching my mind. And you can do that. But there's a trap. And the trap is, well, there are two traps. One is that we fail to act because we evaluate the state of our mind, which is still fearful and doesn't always think kind things about everybody at work. We evaluate that mind and we say, well, I'm not ready to act. I can't stand as Buddha. I can't walk as Buddha. I can't speak as Buddha because I still have this stuff that I need to work on. So I'm going to work on my stuff. And when I get all my stuff worked out, then I'll start doing something. And then the other trap is that maybe we do nothing and we are convinced that we actually are doing something because we're working on our stuff. Right? Well, I don't need to participate in this because I'm cultivating compassion. Right? I'm having this experience of the mind that's very profound. It doesn't actually touch anyone. No one can see it or hear it or smell it or taste it. But it feels good to me. It feels authentic and it feels true. I'm okay. We have to agree to be clumsy. We have to agree to the idea that Buddha makes mistakes. That Buddha resides in vow, not always in skillfulness. For me, this is liberating. I think I've heard people speak about Buddhism as the liberation of the mind. But for me, this practice has taken on more of a feeling of a liberation from it. Not to be trapped in some idea of what Buddha is or what Buddha isn't. But to give up and to give in to the responsibility of it. And to act. Even if that action always comes from a place of not knowing. I'll stop there. But I would love to talk.
Yes, can I sort a question? It seems like that could, sort of be construed to say, well, I'm good as I am, I don't need to work on my stuff. So how do you deal with that kind of potential trap, I guess?
I think that that's only a trap if being good as I am means that you also don't have to do anything. Right? I think the message is that you're good enough. Right? We always, I come from a city with really bad restaurants. And so the measure, we always joke, if we go out to dinner, the measure is never whether it's good, it's whether it's good enough. It's good enough. You're good enough. But good enough for what? You're good enough to act. You're good enough to do something, right? So if I'm good enough means I've got nothing to do, then that's a trap. That's a serious danger. We need to go back to the beginning. But if you think, well, I'm okay, and then you actually take up some sort of work, then I don't see any downside to that, right? Because that will work itself out. And your constant encounter with failure will be education. Yes.
So this constant contact with failure, how are you measuring your failure? How do you measure it? Is it by the effect on other people of the things that you try to do without really knowing what you're going to do? Or is it other people telling you what you're doing is not working? I ask this because I think many of us are really afraid to fail. I know I am.
Yes. Yeah. I think that, I mean, one thing that I think this practice is great at is giving you opportunities to fail a lot in a kind of condensed container, right? If you have an idea about the mind that you're going to bring to Zazen and then you sit for 50 minutes, how many times do you fail in those 50 minutes, right? It's like a superconductor mistake. But, I mean, of course, I think as we move forward in the world, we recognize how people are impacted by our decisions, and we try to learn from that.
Mhm.
And we also try to learn from people we respect, who are willing to point out to us. You know, and this is why we have teachers, why we have sanghas, why we have partners, whom we trust, who can say, hey, you think you're getting this right, but you're not getting it right.
Mm.
Try a different path. But I think that the base failure is when you notice that you're letting up, right? That you're falling back into a kind of distance, you know. Because the only thing we can do is what we can do, and the only moment when we can do it is now. So either we try or we don't, right? And so, you know, I think failure, when I say failure, most has to do with those moments when we don't.
When we don't try.
When we don't try.
Mm-hmm.
We see the opportunity and we think, oh, no, I don't have it. Not today. Because that moment doesn't come back.
Mm.
We just have this one encounter, and then we have this one encounter. And in each encounter, what we can do is we can give everything. And then in the next moment, we can give everything. We never run out, right? And part of what we talked about yesterday is that, you know, we tend to exhaust ourselves trying to figure out when we can take a break and when we can't take a break.
Mm.
If you never take a break, what you find is that you don't have to take a break. Right? It's not as if we don't run on gasoline, right? We don't have a certain amount of fuel and we're going to use it up, and then we have to go to the gas station and fill up. Right? We spend it all right now, and then we spend it all right now, and we spend it all right now. That's how it works, but we find that out through the doing, and we find that out through this kind of frightening, I think, risk of pouring ourselves into something, even when we don't know if we have those resources.
So yesterday you talked about your teachers teaching about standing up straight, standing like Buddha.
Mm.
And I think sometimes when we consider trying and failing, we may be thinking we're trying and failing at something which is very, very large.
Mm.
So maybe you would say something to us about that moment by moment, simply standing up.
Yes, sure. Yeah, so thank you, because that's a really good point. It's easy when we look at the vows and we think, well, okay, in every moment, I'm going to be freeing all beings, and I'm going to be cutting through delusion, I'm going to be entering all Dharma gates. And it has this, you know, if you've ever, as a kid, if you ever tried to make your hair grow, you know, right? This is that feeling of just kind of push. That's not it, right? Because we don't get to control any of that. It would be great, you know, if we had a wand or something and we free all beings. But it isn't like that. What it is that we offer ourselves, and each moment presents an opportunity, and that opportunity may seem like nothing. Those are the dangerous moments, right? Where it's like, well, what does it matter right now? Because there's no one around me. There's nothing much happening, right? But we always, our options in this life are to offer or to withhold. Offer or withhold. So what my teachers taught me, what I was saying, my first day in the monastery, the abbot, I went to his room, and the only thing he said to me was, stand like a Buddha. And then when I left the monastery, I went to his room again, and he said, "Stand like a Buddha. See ya." That was what I got. That in every moment, just as this isn't symbolic. It feels symbolic, but it isn't. In every moment, if you're standing and waiting for the bus, you can stand like this, or you can stand like this, right? You can hold back, or not hold back. And I do this exercise when I teach people Zazen for the first time. We all sit on the floor, and I say, imagine you're just sitting on the ground, and you're waiting for something that isn't coming. Right? And people are... Right? And then I say, okay, and while you're sitting there, imagine that the person you respect most in the world appears in front of you. Then what do? And everyone sits up. That's how now they know how to sit in Zazen. Right? Because it's full. They're meeting that moment. They're meeting something, right? That person that you respect is always there, right? Because every time you meet someone, you're meeting Buddha. We already went over this, right? That person is always in front of you. So you stand up. Here, you offered yourself. Here, you didn't. Right? When you speak, you can choose how you speak. You can choose the words carefully, and you can choose that they will be kind, or that they will be honest, that they will be clear, or not. But it's those little things. It's these little moments that make up a life of offering. It's not some big spiritual story, though that would be great. It'd be great if it were peppered with a few of those moments, but I haven't found them. Yes?
You talked about seeing others as Buddha, and one of the things I've struggled with is trying to see others as Buddha when they're someone who spreads hate and anger and division and that kind of unpleasant
Yes.
things everywhere they go. And
Yeah.
I wonder if you could say something about that.
Sure. Yeah, there are a lot of confused Buddhas. Right? But what I think is so brilliant in the design of this tradition, of Buddhism in general, is that it's all about universality. Right? When we talk about dukkha, when we talk about the nature of suffering or the nature of dissatisfaction, we're saying this is everybody. This is absolutely everyone. It's not just me, right? And there are no grades, right? Some people suffer more than others, and some people suffer in ways that are different from how other people, but dukkha is not that. Dukkha is the same for everybody. That basic experience of wanting something to be not what it is. Right? The way the Dalai Lama talks about it is he says, everybody wants to be happy. Everybody wants to be happy. There's no one who doesn't. But nobody knows how to do it. So they do stupid, stupid things in service of being happy. When we encounter people who are living their lives in a way that seems completely counter to what we think is true, or is kind, or is honest, every one of those people is trying to be happy, and they got an idea in their head about how to do it, and it's wrong. Right? But I think that if we see ourselves clearly, we can see that clearly. Right? We can see how people are lost. And we can insist on connecting with them in that way, even if they don't want to connect with us. Right? There are a lot of people in the news who are trying to be happy and so transparently don't know how. It's not just that they make me unhappy or that they cause suffering for other people. You can see on their faces that they're not happy, right? We can sympathize with that, right? We can start with that, and then we can make sure that we don't make the same mistakes. Yes.
I'd like to describe a situation that feels like mistake, or I judge it as a mistake, and there's plenty of learning within it. And I'm curious how you would see this, given that Buddha is as Buddha does. Buddha makes mistakes. I added Buddha is not perfect, and Buddha resides in vow, and I added not perfection. And I also added Buddha doesn't know, which is, oh, wow, that's helpful. Okay. So there was an evening where my wife is sitting on the couch. My wife, our child, and me. Our child became mine about 2 years ago. He's 13. And he's upset about school, and he's kind of complaining and whining, but he's there with us. And in this process, I can tell that I'm about to say something that I was sure of in the moment. I'm no longer sure, but it was, Greg, turn, reach, draw, and just hold that child next to me. And I didn't. Partly because I was upset for whatever reason. I had tomatoes for dinner, I don't know. It doesn't really matter, except that I realized there was something about me, my own suffering, was getting in the way of this.
Right.
That simple, compassionate act. What later felt like Buddha's appearance is not beating myself up about that, learning and being more ready the next time that there's something like that shows up. So that's about as far as I've gone with that particular story in my mind. I'm curious if you have more to add.
No. It's a good story. That's life, right?
Yeah.
And you can second guess yourself all you want, but you don't know if the thing you wanted to do was the right thing either.
That's right. That's right.
Right?
Yes. Yeah.
This.
Yeah.
Buddha doesn't know.
Yeah.
That's a really important idea, because if Buddha does know, if Buddha is omniscient, if Buddha understands things beyond the intention of Buddha, right? Then this whole tradition that's telling you that you are Buddha is wrong. That's really simple.
Yeah.
Right? And even if we can empirically decide that the first one is true, or that that in fact the Buddha is omniscient, right? I would try to forget that. Because then you're never going to do anything.
Unfortunately, in the interests of time, I think we need to wrap, unless there's some last very quick question. Otherwise, I think probably we need to chant so Koun can do his vows and we can send him on his way. Thank you for your talk this morning and for being with us for the whole weekend.
Thank
Hope
you.
we'll see you again.
It's really been an honor to be here. Thank you.